Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly podcast show. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood on Relax Radio. So in this section, we're still going to carry on about how do you solve the problem knife crime. We're joined by a guest, Zak Hussain, who's a local youth worker. So in this section, we're going to talk about practical things we can do to actually reduce knife crime. And before I sort of like lead into the conversation with Zak, just want to give the context. The context is actually Andrew and I discussed about it a few weeks ago. There's been a spike. If you look at the correlation in terms of restrictions being lifted from COVID, there's been a rise in incidences in East London and London wider of violent acts on youth in particular knife crimes, and we saw a spike, and we're kind of like concerned. We were concerned about what can we do to actually head this off. And lo and behold, there's been incidents in the Isle of Dogs. There's one on Mile End, and that's got us thinking. So I'm going to go straight into Zak with some what kind of practical things we can do in the short term, and then hopefully Andrew will talk about a different approach to these issues, a public health approach, and I saw like the campaign we're formulating. So Zak, over to you. What can we practically do to head off this kind of like you're seeing a spike kind of ish of correlation of rising incidences? You've got summer coming, you've got schools closing down, and you've got an ease of the restrictions of COVID, and it seems like a jack in the box. All of a sudden, all these pent up issues are coming to the fore.
I think for me, like in the short term, it's important that parents and carers are empowered to actually have that discussion with their young person first and foremost. Do they know who they need to speak to if there's an issue at school or outside of school? You know, I'll definitely encourage the parents to keep an eye out on your child if there's changes in behaviour. I've seen people on social media actually patting their kids down, and I think that's a positive step because of the fact that young people might not know the dangers of actually carrying a knife or actually what the potential risks are. So that's something that in the meantime we can all do from our own households and actually have that relationship with our young people. I've got an 18-year-old sibling who I keep close tabs on. He's working, he's doing his studies, but actually he could be someone that falls in the wrong place at the wrong time, or a grievance happens and they can't deal with it through words, or they don't know how to sort of put an end to it without resorting to violence. So that's something I take personal responsibility for, and I think everyone should be able to do that. When it comes down to sort of the local authority and what we need to, like I said, there needs to be a contextual safeguarding approach to certain locations of hotspots. So there might be the fact that, you know, actually this is a ASB hotspot and the residents are complaining because there's always groups of young people loitering. Well, actually, let's look at that prior to it being an issue of violence or another knife crime related issue. What can we do to make that area safer? It could be investing in better lighting. It could be actually having a chat with the young people and referring them over to other provision that's available. These are things that need to happen, and also being aware of who the young people are at risk in this borough is so important, because there's also working groups that happen as part of the Children's Directorate, from criminal exploitation to sexual exploitation of those at risk on the gangs matrix. Partners like the police, doctors, you know, social workers, youth workers should be part of that, and actually knowing who the young people are and actually giving them something positive to do. I think in the other medium to short term would be looking at who we can bring in as a local authority to support young people. And there was an amazing project called Rise by St John's Ambulance who taught young people the free skill of first aid. It's an amazing thing to have on your CV. Young people who are going to be victims of a violent assault or knife crime are going to be the ones that are going to be the first responders. If they've got that skill, then maybe that can save a life. Looking at also how we market things to young people, there needs to be a real uptake. And I know this council is a bit shoddy when it comes to consultations and things seem to be skewed. We'd rather have an honest picture of actually what young people think of the provisions available to them. Yeah. It might be the wrong date, it might be the wrong time, it might not be appropriate because there's cultural differences. But really scaling things back and actually listening to young people would be able to get more young people involved in positive activities. Like I mentioned, amazing work that's happening already through the third sector. The third sector needs support, they need resources, they need our local authority to champion the great work that they're doing so that more funds can be brought forward and more young people can be brought to the fold. And I definitely think we need to be looking at what age we engage young people from. I know the council made a change from 13 to 8. 8 is amazing, but also for young people and families, preschool, during nursery years, what is it that we can do to encourage families to spend time together and actually play? The difficulty that we have here in the East End, there's parents who have to work 2-3 jobs or who might not be working and don't have the skills to engage with their young person. we need to make sure that parents are empowered. And I think it's a responsibility for everybody, irrespective of faith background, but also faith groups, community groups, churches can all play a part in actually disseminating that information. Keep an eye on your kids. Next week is Bank Holiday weekend. Kids can easily be lured into doing things that are illicit, illegal, ASP, but also when it comes down to looking at the young people themselves over the 6 weeks summer holidays, let's make sure that we've got an amazing offer, we've got an amazing program, we know who the young people are, we're targeting these activities to the right families and the right young people, and let's keep them occupied. And if you can do that, I guarantee you the crime rate will go down, people will feel invested in their own communities, people will be more inclined to take up more skills and opportunities later down the line because they've got the confidence of achieving something now. I think these are small things that you can do. Longer term, it will be absolutely amazing if we had a youth service for young people, designed by young people. And we've also got capacity within our third sector and also collaboration happening a lot more freely to talk about particular issues. It could be 1 week, all right, we know Halloween's coming up. We know there's going to be a rise in ASP and fireworks. Let's put a campaign together starting in summer so we know what we're doing in October. So things are a lot more planned in place and we know, okay, great. There's always been a fireworks issue on Stepney Green every single year without fail. We already know about it. Let's go the week before half term, go to all the schools and encourage them to get the police partners to come and actually talk about the dangers of carrying fireworks, if they're not used safely and what the repercussions could be. And during that week of Halloween half term, the kids aren't going to be doing that because you've got your own display that kids can actually see in their own locality. We need to start thinking local because each community in town is very, very different. The island is different to Wapping. Wapping is very different to Myland. Myland is very different to Whitechapel. We need people from our community to be in these positions, to be the next generation of youth workers, to be people that they can relate to in order to steer them to the right direction at critical points in their growth and growing up as well.
Cool. So I just want to bring Andrew into there. Andrew, we've had discussions outside the show about a different approach to knife crime, which includes a different approach to how we engage with young people in the borough, so like a public health approach. Do you want to talk about that, this kind of thinking that you had and the kind of like campaign you're thinking of doing together, both of us?
So Glasgow is very famous in terms of the approach that they've taken in terms of something called a violence reduction unit. And they basically decided to treat their violence through a sort of kind of public health. They basically treated it as a public health emergency issue. And the argument being is basically young kids are stabbing each other and therefore it's a health issue. It's not an ASB issue. It's not a crime issue. It's a health issue. So and one of the practical points is we've also got a lot of money in the health budget. So Tower Hamlets Council has a public health department. It's got about 40 staff and a budget of £35 million. And I'm pretty sure very little of that is actually spent on keeping kids safe from knives. And therefore, so there's a practical point is that this is the right solution, but also it means there's a pot of money that's available that might be used to supplement. So in terms of the practical things that we're working on, and the reason why I was looking at my screen a bit while Zak was talking is because actually I was writing down some of the things that he was saying. And what we're doing is that we're working on this draft document, and we'll present it first as a petition. But before we launch it as a petition, we're going to advertise it on social media as a draft and basically ask for your input, your ideas. Are these the right things to be asking the council to do? Should we be adding things? So the first stage of this is to basically consult you on that petition. And as I said, I was writing ideas down from Zak. And then we'll put it on the council website. We'll ask you to sign that petition once we've agreed it. We've then got a council meeting in July on the 21st. So we'll try and debate this issue there. We've also got on the 29th of June, so actually it's not that far away, we've got the Health and Wellbeing Board. And the Health and Wellbeing Board is basically where Tower Hamlets Council, the NHS, and other stakeholder organisations come together to talk about health issues. That body inevitably has spent most of the last year talking about COVID, but we think it needs to start talking about actually how we keep young children safe, and that includes from knives. So that's very roughly the plan that we've got, is a kind of asking what you think, and then doing a petition, and then basically going back to these two council meetings in June and July to try and encourage the council to be more active in this area.
Yeah, I just want to give a practical example of how this approach can work. So with the incident on Hamlet's Way in Mile End, the victim was fortunate in the sense that there were people who were trained as first aid responders, and that training initiative was put in by a local youth group after another knife crime incident where they encouraged young people to take up first aid training. And because people had that first aid training, they were confident in dealing with the trauma, and we have a casualty instead of a fatality. And so it's a different way of looking at this issue rather than it being an enforcement issue of just arresting people and locking them up. Can we prevent these incidences from happening, including the casualties and the fatalities as well? And one thing we don't take into account is the actual psychological trauma as well of being a victim of certain these kind of attacks, but also the lost lives as well. The perpetrators, they're looking at a long time in the criminal justice system. It's another young life wasted. Can we prevent these things from happening? So definitely, Andrew and I, we will sort of post this on social media. We would like your input and to have a collective think about this and a collective effort to have a sustainable solution to make the streets safer for our children and young people in this borough. One life or one casualty is one too many in this day and age, in Tower Hamlets and London and in the United Kingdom in general. So we're going to go straight into a break. After the break, we're going to discuss the housing targets, or are we meeting our housing targets? Who are these housing targets for, and are we getting the right mix? So there's been a few big decisions. Andrew's going to give us a bit of background on those, and also basically we'll delve into this. Housing targets, who are they for, and are we meeting them? So join us after the break.